and Harry were in the park. They were taking Mrs. Lacey's dog Toffee for a walk. They put Toffee on a long lead and tied to a bench. Then they sat down to read comics. "You won't get away from us now," said Harry. When it was time to go home, William wound up Toffee's lead. "Time to go home, Toffee. It's dinner time," he said. Toffee gave him a funny look. He didn't like being on the lead. The boys and Toffee walked to Mrs. Lacey's house. However, something was wrong. The door was locked and Mrs. Lacey didn't seem to be at home. Harry knocked on the door, but nobody answered. William shouted through the door. Toffee ran to the back of the house and began to bark. "What's wrong, boy?" asked Harry. "He must have heard something," said William. "Let's take a look." They looked through the kitchen window. Mrs. Lacey was lying on the floor and she was not moving. "Oh no, she must have fallen over," said William. "I will go next door and get Mrs. Knight." Mrs. Knight had a spare key to Mrs. Lacey's house. She opened the back door and they all ran inside. "I'll think she'll be all right," said Mrs. Knight. "Please phone for an ambulance. I'll stay here with her." Mrs. Lacey and Mrs. Knight's houses did not have a phone, and the nearest public phone booth was at the end of the road. William and Harry ran as fast as they could to the phone booth. However, when they got there, the phone was broken. "This is terrible," said William angrily. "We must find another one." The next phone booth was outside the cinema. However, when the boys got there, they found it was wrecked too. The windows were broken and the red paint had been sprayed everywhere. "What a mess," said Harry. "What do we do now?" asked William. "There's another booth near the park," said Harry, "but that's quite far away." "We don't have a choice," said William. "We'll just have to run all the way." They were out of breath when they reached the park. When they were running towards the phone booth, they saw someone in it. "Oh no, someone's in there. We'll have to wait," said Harry. "Don't worry," said William. "We'll tell them it's an emergency." Then, when William and Harry arrived at the phone booth, two boys came out and ran into the park. The box was full of smoke. "That was Toby and Tim from school," said William. "They've set the phone booth on fire." The telephone booth was in flames. "We must try to put the fire out," said Harry. "There isn't time. We need to phone for an ambulance for Mrs. Lacey." In the end, the boys had to run all the way to Harry's shop. Harry asked his mother to phone for the ambulance. "Now we'll have to run all the way back to Mrs. Lacey's," said William. The ambulance was already there when the boys got back. Mrs. Lacey was being pushed out of the door. She was worrying about Toffee. "He can come and stay with me," said William. "Mom and Dad won't mind." Harry told the ambulance driver about all the wrecked telephone booths. "It was terrible," he said. "We couldn't find one booth that hasn't been wrecked." "It makes our job very difficult," said the driver. The next day, William and Harry went to the hospital to see Mrs. Lacey. "I'm feeling much better," said Mrs. Lacey. "But they're keeping me here until Sunday. How's Toffee?" "He's all right," said William. "He slept in my room last night." "Make sure you keep him on his lead," said Mrs. Lacey. "He can be quite naughty sometimes, you know." "Don't worry," said Harry. "We know." On the way home, William and Harry walked past a wrecked telephone booth. An engineer was mending it. He had fitted a new telephone and was fixing the door. The boys told him about the trouble they had the day before. "I spend all my time repairing wrecked phone booths," he said. "As soon as they are mended, they get wrecked again. I don't know why I'm wasting my time." When William and Harry got to the park, they had a terrible shock. Toby and Jim were there. Toby grabbed William and Jim helped Harry's aunt. They pulled them into a corner. "We saw you watching us," said Toby. "If you tell anybody you saw us breaking the telephone, we are going to break you too." No! Shouted Harry. We won't tell. You had better not, hissed Toby. What do we do now? Asked Harry. There's nothing we can do, said William. I wish we had Toffee with us. You would have scared them off. Speaking of which, said Harry, it's time for his walk. Toffee was glad to see the boys. He knew it was this time for his walk. However, he didn't want to be on the lead. You have to get used to it, Toffee, said William. I'm not going to let you run off again. The boys took Toffee to the park. It was beginning to get dark. We had better get home now, said William. Toffee didn't want to go. He was having a good time. Just then they saw Toby and Jim. William and Harry stayed behind a bush to see where they were going. They are going into the telephone booth, said Harry. It's just been mended. Are they going to wreck it again? Let's take a closer look, whispered William. The boys crept towards the telephone booth. They kept quiet so that Toby and Jim wouldn't notice. Suddenly, Toffee saw another dog. He barked and ran after it. The lead was jerked out of William's hand. Toffee chased the dog towards the telephone booth. Come back here, shouted William. However, Toffee kept running. The two dogs chased around and around the telephone booth. Toffee's long lead had caught in a bush and it wound round and round the telephone booth. Toby and Jim were trapped inside. They're trapped, laughed William. He rushed behind the booth and caught Toffee. Harry held the dog's collar while William tied the ends of the lead together. Now let's leave before Toby and Jim sees us, said William. Let's tell the police too, said Harry. At that moment, a yellow van stopped near the telephone booth. It was the telephone engineer. Toby and Jim were shouting for help inside. Let's wait and see what happens, said Harry. The boys hid behind a bush. The telephone engineer laughed. He went to the bank and spoke on his radio. A few minutes later, a police car arrived. A policeman untied the lead and pulled Toby and Jim out of the telephone booth. Jim had a hammer and Ken had a can of red spray paint. Their hands were covered in paint. You have been caught red-handed, laughed the engineer. Toby and Tim were sorry. They began to cry. At the weekend, Mrs. Lacey returned home. She was glad to be back. She was glad to see Toffees, too. I hope he didn't give you any trouble, she said. No, not at all, said William. The boys looked at each other and smiled. The end.